Okay, everybody, you're very welcome. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jim Herlihy again. As you know, he's a police historian and genealogist, a retired member of the Garda Síochána, and I believe he's the co-founder of the Garda Historical Society. He's also a fellow of the Genealogical Society of Ireland, and he has addressed us before and has had many publications on mostly on the subject of policing and the RIC and that. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Jim to address us tonight. So you're very welcome, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. Just to see. Can you see this?
We're just seeing your desktop at your background thing at the moment. Just do your screen sharing thing.
1 second. Escape. Put it in here. Share. Oh, sorry, one share. Yeah. This one here.
There you go. This is looking good.
That's actually 1 second.
That's it, Jim.
Yeah, here we are. This is.
I just hit your slideshow start bit.
Yeah. Will be okay? Hello?
There you go. There you go. Perfect.
Yeah. The first thing I'd like to say is that I'm not a military historian or anything like it. My only interest in the military is its connection with the RIC or the DMP. And the latest publication, which I ended up doing myself rather than trouble for courts press at this stage, because with the time factor to get it out, was to remember the RIC who volunteered for World War One, and especially a roll of honour for those who were killed in the line of duty who never made it home. The things I'd like to discuss is that how my interest began with the RIC and with the First World War from a personal level, and how it developed from there. So I'll start with this is my father, Michael Herlihy. He was born 145 years ago, born 1879. And this is me in the front with the braces, and my younger brother, who also later on joined the Guards. Now, and this is my father in the Royal Field Artillery in World War One. There's such a generation gap that when I was in school, I was asked to do a project. What did your father do in the war? So I went home and I asked him. I wrote 20 pages and I got a clatter off the teacher. The reason being is that he said, you're a war out. I was writing about the First World War. All the other class were writing about the Second World War. Now, I came across this image of my father just by sheer accident researching for somebody else in the Cork Examiner. And this tape from the 4th of February 1916. He had emigrated to Boston when he was 19 in 1898. And he was a tailor by trade, a master tailor by trade, as was his father and 3 other generations before that, and brothers and uncles. And he was hugely into military tailoring. And he made uniforms for the Royal Irish Constabulary. And his brother made uniforms for the gentry, for the female gentry. So you could say, if you pardon the pun, they had it sewn up between them. My father's biggest claim to fame when he was in the States is that, again, he sewed the buttons in the waistcoat of the then President William Howard Taft. And I thought it was a tall order. In fact, I had to go, there was no internet at that time to verify it. I had looked at Encyclopedia Britannica to see was my father in the States when Taft was there. Now, in order that his brother could say that he did the same job, they picked every second button. And when my father came back directly to Liverpool and volunteered for the Royal Field Artillery, the territorial force, because he was over the age, and he even lied about his age. He would have been 36 at that time. So we have his discharge papers. I was left with a trunk of a lot of uniforms and bits and pieces, but belonged to him. I have his discharge papers. Now, if you go online at the moment on the fold, I've just discovered only recently, is that where a person was actually injured on duty, you're likely to get, and he was repatriated to a hospital, you're likely to get his injury record. And also, the added fact with him is that he enlisted from the United States. So he was told by a captain that you could be repatriated from the country from which you served, from which you joined. Now, he enlisted from Boston, so he fills out forms trying to get back, but they didn't have it. But I actually came across letters from him trying to prove his case. Now, the record on the left is the original record, and this was on the file on the other side. And his discharge was no longer fit for war service, which he was lucky in a way. Now, it's to go a little bit further, and what's on the record, this is just a summary of his active service. You see, he enlisted on the 26th of April 1915. He embarked at Southampton on the 28th of September after training, disembarked at Le Havre on the 29th, and then he forfeited his pay for one day. He was absent from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. on the 2nd of January 1916. Now, he fractured his left ankle on the 16th of September 1916, and he was transferred back to the hospital. And what's very interesting about the record, it actually says the ship that brought him back, the SS Brighton. And this is I came across this when it was a troop ship. A lot of the ships were requisitioned by the Royal Navy at the outbreak of World War I, and this is the actual ship that he was on. Now, what's interesting about it also, this is the repatriation form that he was signed and filled out, and he claimed repatriation. He said that you can see this is on it. He was recommended by Captain Heap to fill out this form, and he says names the ship, the Etruria, the Cunard Line, they arrived in Liverpool, nationality Irish. So he didn't think that was enough on it. So he decided this is another letter. His handwriting is the exact same as my own. And he's talking about, one second. He says, I call to your attention these lines. I volunteered for service from Somerville, Massachusetts. Now, his aunt had married a mayor of Boston, James Michael Curley, and my father had emigrated 8 years. He had actually emigrated in 1898 and actually had come back twice, and back with other sisters, and went home and back again. And you see, he went to Speakland Street Barracks. I went over there 100 years to the day, and I walked from there down to Liverpool to the docks, where he would have left. I did a selfie from back from the 100 years to the day. But he's then saying, this is in 1919, I'm now discharged and living with my brother in Ireland, and I would like to get back to America again. Will you please let me have particulars of what to do? And so he's trying to reinforce his claim to get away and get back again. And then he follows up with another letter with regards to my claim, just to try and add some more detail. I left East Boston on April the 14th on the Etruria Cunard Line, landed in Liverpool on the 24th and volunteered for active service. Speaking Barracks again. My address where I came from was 6 Charles Street, Somerville, Massachusetts, USA. And which must be on my papers. In other words, have a look for them. I'm telling you the truth. These are the best grounds in which I can give. And the name of the captain of the ship in which I sailed was Captain Smith. He could have picked any name, but he picked the Smith. But I know have leave with my brother again. He explains that again. Now, the address that he gave, that house is actually for sale at the moment. I just looked up the other day, and it's for sale. And that's sold in 2017 for 520,000, and it's now for sale for over 994. As I said before, I was a master tailor, and this is again with the First World War interest. Captain John Coulter's, Bone Coulter's, who shot Sheehy Skeffington, He lived from Carrigadrohid in Cork, and my father was his tailor. My grandfather was actually a tailor. My father was away in the war, and my father actually sent him a dress suit in later years, and this is it here in the centre that my father sent to him. His daughter by the second marriage, that little girl on the right, is still alive. She's living in Washington State. She was a teacher. As you know, Bone Coulters shot Sheehy's Geffington in 1916 and went to Dartmoor and eventually was pardoned. Found guilty but the same, but eventually pardoned and went off to Canada and got 900 acres over there. And this is his brother. Again, we had bits and pieces of his uniform. He was in Dublin Castle, but due to his height, he was well over 6 feet. He didn't survive too long at the front. He was killed on the 15th of March, 1915. Now, my interest in the RIC began also with my father and in uniforms and that in 1961 when my father brought me back to Carrigadrohid. And this is the Carrigadrohid barracks in 1910 in peaceful times. The barrack was attacked in June of 1920 and destroyed. And there was my father's claim anyway is that he happened to be in the station area around that week making uniforms, and they were actually making a halt out behind the wardrobe to get back out and into the house next door. So much so that the story went is that one of the policemen was actually playing the fiddle inside while the attack was going on. And in fact, they used a bit of poetic license because I found a photograph. This is a man playing the fiddle after the attack outside. Now, one of the last uniforms my father tailored belonged to the RIC was actually not 1922, but it was founded, but 1924. And this was the sergeant that defended the station at the time, Sergeant William Root. His son after became chief detectives in New York, and I've corresponded with the family. He was awarded a Constabulary Medal for defending the station, as were 6 others. But it has now turned full circle with them, and I'll just show you in a minute. And this is a man I met in 1961, probably the most famous soldier of World War One, Lieutenant General Sir Adrian Carton de Wert, BC. There were so many bits missing out of him, and because my father was always cutting down his uniforms, that he said it was the best job he ever got because he said it was the least material but the most money. This is him here, and I just run a little clip there now. I'm not going to summarise about, but he has. I'll just show you some more bits and pieces that belong to him. But hopefully this will work anyway. It's just a little.
It's not coming through here.
No, nothing yet there, Jim. Give it another click.
Not working, no?
No.
Click it again.
Yeah.
You might need to reshare that.
Oh, you have to set them back up again. Yeah. No, I'll give it a skip anyway. It's just only a summary of him, but there's 2 biographies of him. I have some more photographs of him, but he's one of the most wounded soldiers of World War One. The main point I was trying to make is that I have his last uniforms and I have his miniature medals that were they were called the tailor set of medals that he used to wear at functions, not taking out his so he could save on his good medals. But this is the uniform I have belonged to him. And I have his original, actually, Sam Brown belt that he wore at the Somme that was transferred to all his uniforms over the years. And I have his mess dress uniform, and these are the miniatures. And I think there's 21 altogether. I have lots of bits and pieces of his previous uniforms. He was in the Boer War, World War One and World War Two, and he was a plenipotentiary to Chiang Kai-shek after World War Two. These are the miniatures, including the Victoria Cross. I also have his tropical dress uniform. Amongst being injured so many times, he crash landed 2 planes. He was a prisoner of war and escaped for a short while and was recaptured. He walked out of a restaurant in Cairo and ceiling caved in. Now, what's interesting about it, this is a very famous photographer, Yusuf Karsh, and what he does, what you'll notice from most of these photographs is the hands, an expert in depicting the hands. Now, the thing about the general is that he had lost one hand, but he took a photograph in such a way which shows how strong the only hand he has left is using is a strong face, so just the art of photography of that time. And talking about name dropping, you can see Mountbatten is here, Churchill, Chiang Roosevelt, and he was always at the top of his game. Now, I joined the Garda Síochána in 1977, and I was attached to Blarney from 1980. I spent nearly 30 years there. And this is Blarney in peaceful times, but in 1920, the same week as the barracks in Carrigador was attacked, so also was Blarney barracks. And when I arrived in Blarney, once I heard all about this, I tracked down the last sergeant there, his daughter, and she was in her 90s at the time, and I walked her in around the station, and she just gave me a great description of what the station was like in 1920. And at the time, I was trying to find out who was in the various stations, and I eventually ended up doing the history of the RIC. However, I got a phone call from a lady one day. She says, "I have a live one for you." And I said, "What do you mean?" "My father's alive. He was a member of the Royal Irish Constabulary. He was only one of, I think, 27 that were alive at the time." And I got this, I presented him with a statuette anyway on his 100th birthday, and he died 8 months later. I got to work with him on the Michael Collins film because it was filmed down in Wicklow, and he was the only person we could find alive at that time who could physically describe the inside of a station. And then they used the same Arts Department also used it for the filming of the Wind That Shakes the Barley, which was that section, the attack on the barracks was done in Mallow. Now, it really turned full circle kind of for me in that, number one, having listed all the members of the RIC, and number two was trying to remember them. There are only 2 memorials, none in Ireland to the RIC, but there are 2 in London. And the origin of those, believe it or not, comes from the attack on Carrigadroid barracks and Blarney barracks. And it was raised in the House of Commons by Colonel William Alfred Ashley, who's Mountbatten's father-in-law. And he said, "What promotion, recognition, or reward he proposed to bestow on the Sergeant William Root and the 8 constables who defended the RIC barracks at Carrigador Macroom on the 20th of June. In view of the fact that the attack lasted from 11 p.m. until 4:30 a.m., when it was beaten off, that the roof of the barracks was set alight by the use of petrol, and that the defenders were not only exposed to danger from hand grenades, rifle fire, incendiary bombs, and other explosives, but were also very nearly burned alive." He goes on mentioning also, now, as a result of that, 2 memorials were erected in London, and they're there to this day. This is the one in St. Patrick's Chapel in Westminster Cathedral. Now, another coincidence has come up in that the rector or the Monsignor of St. Patrick in Westminster Cathedral at the time, believe it or not, was Carton de Wert's first cousin. So just another coincidence. And this is the second memorial in St. Paul's Cathedral. Now, I got involved with the Harp Society, and the purpose of that was to remember all members killed in the line of duty, and also those who not alone were killed at home, but those who volunteered for the First World War and were killed on duty. And now it takes one person to start the initiative in doing something about it, wanting to have the information, but to do it. And this is a former Garda colleague of mine who died earlier this year. And when we formed the Harp Society, he decided upon himself in the 28th of February 2010 to have a mass in Granard in County Longford and invite relatives of RIC people, the PSNI down, and in fact the PSNI walked the streets above there without any difficulty in uniform. And this is where the Harp Society began, just on him taking the initiative. And the scale of those who are not remembered on memorials is, just for the RIC, is 649 and 179 who were killed in the Great War. So that's 828 lives lost. And with the Dublin Metropolitan Police, it's 41 lives lost out of a total force of 12,566. What happened then was with the decade of centenaries, when we formed the committee, we wrote to that group. We didn't get the courtesy of a reply to have a memorial put up. And then there was this, what do I say, was remembrance service was done for the 90th anniversary of the disbandment of the. And this man, an ex-inspector, Jerry Lovett, joined us and decided to do something about that. So we were advised to form a committee. This is the RUC George Cross Society got involved also. Then we formed a committee, and then we had interdenominational services. We tried to keep the thing, include all religious denominations, and keep it apolitical to remember them. And this is just a section. A lot of these people here are widows of RIC men, or have been injured, or have relatives that were killed. And it's like carbon copy what has happened in the north. It's like happening all over again. They're unsolved murders. For the RIC, lived in the same kind of situation after the disbandment. These just some of the services that we had. Now, what I see has happened in that by the decade of centenaries. We found then coming up to the centenary of the 1916 Rising, we found again, we made several attempts to have the police remembered, and we said, look, we'll have to do something ourselves because nothing is happening. So this is 100 years to the day. Constable John O'Brien, the first casualty of the 1916 Rising, we had a commemoration at Dublin Castle to the minute, and we even the British ambassador turned up. We laid a wreath, and what happened then was we were just walking away when this young girl came up wanting to put down a bunch of flowers. So we asked her what was her connection, because we had relatives of James O'Brien there, and she said, I'm not connected anyway at all to him. I'm connected to the man that killed him, she said. And that's Sean Connolly, who was shot down off the roof of the castle shortly after, and we're commemorating and remembering him today. Now, another, what would I say, kind of sidestepping issue to get something done for the only police casualty killed in the west of Ireland in 1916 was Patrick Whelan. And the group that was in, and the county council in Galway, said that they were putting up a memorial. It wasn't to the policeman that was killed, but it was to commemorate the Rising at that time. So what happened then was they agreed to renovate the grave of Constable Whelan. Now, there was a gentleman turned up that a friend of mine knew for years, but didn't know his connection. And we found out that we knew that he was a grandson of a district inspector. But the part that we didn't know is that his grandfather was the man that shot the policeman. So he was there for a double entry. And then now, again, another lost opportunity was another event came up where this Inspector John Mills of the Dublin Metropolitan Police, in 1918, he was having arrested a prisoner, bring him to the Bridewell and bring to Store Street Station. And on his way, he was hit with a hurley down the back of the head. It just shows how complicated Irish history can get. What happened was he was hit down with the hurley back of the head, died the following day. So we found his grave in Mount Jerome and decided to remember him. Now, the guy that hit him over the head was a young fellow, only about 17 years of age. But in 1932, he made an admission saying that he killed this inspector, and he was the person, and he's making that admission on an application for his IRA pension, but it's on Garda-headed notepaper. He'd actually joined the Garda Síochána. He was deemed to be insane afterwards and died. And these are just some of the memorials that we did over that period. Now, just what I didn't say about the photograph is the photograph on the right is the grandnephew of the policeman, and the man on the left is the grandnephew of the policeman. The man on the right is the grandnephew of the man that shot him, and they're standing over the grave 100 years to the actual minute that the policeman died. Again, we just cleaned up other headstones of those who hadn't headstones. We did the same thing for them. Now, in order to get the RIC remembered, the number of publications, I've been sending information to the Police Roll of Honour Trust. It's now the Police Remembrance Trust. And they published a book in 2019, and it was launched in London by the Police Commissioner, Cressida Dick, at the time. And I managed to get all of the policemen in Ireland included in it. And 15,000 policemen have been killed since records began, and they're all in it. Now, as I mentioned about the events that we were holding in Mount Argus, these interdenomination events, we invited some politicians from time to time, and Charlie Flanagan turned up at one of ours, and he got to meet a lot of the RUC widows at the time, and I could see in his face that he was completely shocked by the whole thing. And he took it upon himself to do something about it, and that's when it was proposed, but not done properly, to have an event at Dublin Castle, and all hell broke loose at that stage. So the next thing we decided to do was we'd again team up with the Police Roll of Honour Trust. Couldn't have an event in Ireland, so we had one in the Garage Chapel in London, and we did wreaths at both memorials, and over 560 people turned up, and most of the people there has some connection, one way or the other, to a casualty. We also commissioned this RIC standard, which was unveiled for the first time on the day. And this is the committee for latest committee. Now, researching RIC, there is a precedence between RIC going off to war, and that is in the Crimea. Now, one of the most important set of records in the RIC, and they're on Find My Past, and I couldn't emphasise how important they are, is the Royal Irish Constabulary list and directory. It began in 1841. And it was published biannually on the 1st of January and the 1st of July from 1841 up to 1921. And this gentleman on the left was founded and edited by John Monsell. He edited the whole bit. He knew everybody was in the RIC until his retirement. He's the fellow who used to change everything in it. But not alone for, RIC, there's also other government departments. There's resident magistrates, there's the Coast Guard, there's the Revenue Police, and they're all those policemen who have medals. So those who fought in campaigns or wearing medals are all to be found in it. It's an absolutely fantastic source, and it shows there's a complete alphabetical list of RIC stations, the 1,600 stations, and who's in them. Now, another great source was, I came across this several years ago, the Constabulary Gazette, in the British newspaper library, in the newspaper library in Colonial, and I found the full set of these from the Constabulary Gazette from 1898 up to 1921, and this is what they're saying about themselves, the RIC. So it's anyone in the RIC, you'll find something about a station, or you'll find something, and you can see this one here, the men at the front. What the correspondence was going back and forward about the support that they were getting and what they were thinking about themselves at the time. But it's a fantastic source also. Now, as I said, there was a priest set in with what we call the Mounted Staff Corps, and in the Crimea, and they were comprised of 50 troopers of the Irish Constabulary and 50 from the London Metropolitan Police. Now, they were trained in Cole's factory in London in the use of the Colt revolver, and they served as military police. They're the first military police that we have, but in the Crimea. And also, that's them in the Mounted Staff Corps, securing everything that was there while the soldiers were at war. Some of these end up, these RIC men, the 50, or another 49 who also served at the commissariat, end up in the RIC, and this one in particular, Head Constable John Mack, is decorated again with the Sea Gallantry Medal. And again, I found all his details in the RIC list. The commissariat then and the transport court, as I said, another 49 members of the Irish Constabulary served in those. In the book I did, Tracing Your Ancestors, I've listed all, that 99 are all in that book. There are those then who would have served in various campaigns in the military and then transferred to the constabulary, like probably the most famous is Thomas Esmond, who won the Victoria Cross in the Crimea, ends up a Deputy Inspector General. There's Charters Brew from Corofin, who served at the commissariat, and he founded the British Columbia Police in 1859. And then this man, John Mulcahy, served in the Charge of the Light Brigade. And that's where his arms folded there, you can see near right of the centre. And at Balaclava, he set up the mounted troop in the depot afterwards. I found his grave where that gentleman there is standing, unmarked, in Glasnevin Cemetery. And now, when the First World War broke out, the Inspector General of the RIC looked for RIC men to volunteer for World War I service. And you can see there, first of all, he looked for 200 men. 2,000 applied. 752 were accepted, and 179 were killed. The Inspector General of the RIC, who'd been a colonel in the army in India, also by coincidence is the inventor of the game of snooker. And these are the casualties of the First World War: 7 in 1914, 27 1915, 56 1916, 58 1917, 30 in 1918 and 1919. I'm going to say one there. He had been wounded and died just shortly into 1919. These are the various, it's a total of 50 regiments, individual regiments that they would have served in. Now, the most difficult of those to trace are, when you're taken from the RIC side of it, is that where the RIC service record said they were selected for service, is the words they use, in the, say, for example, in the Irish Guards. But if they get transferred later on, there's a complete list of them, and just going back to the Royal Irish Constabulary lists where they are at the time. But if they transfer, you may not get to transfer to the new regiment. And they were the most difficult of all of the ones that were there, but these are their capage. And for example, there was 17 Royal Dublin Fusiliers. The majority were 109 of the Irish Guards. And so I found all of those then in either remembered on memorials whose remains were not found, or those whose graves were in cemeteries, 55 in France, 18 in Belgium. When I say 55 cemeteries, there are 119 casualties in that, and all the way down. And only 9 bodies were repatriated to Ireland. And those 9 were ones who died in British hospitals. So there was the opportunity to transfer the bodies home. Now, and the 9 that were found, their final resting places are in Arklow, Carseveen, Cavan, Drumcliff, Grangegarman Cemetery, there's one. And all of those here, and just their names. An interesting photograph this is, in that George Edward Savile Young, who was killed serving with the Irish Guards. If you look at the big photograph, you'll see a lady there to the right of the entrance, holding a child at the time. He's actually in that group marching out to go off to war. And the child later becomes a major in the British Army. And that's her last sighting of him at the time. Now, as I just mentioned, the ones that are difficult to find is that this chap here was born on 27th of January 1894 in Gutmull, Ballyconnell, County Fermanagh. He joined the RIC in 1913. He was allocated to Banbridge, County Down. And on the 12th of November 1913, as Constable 67502, he was selected for service, joined the war in the Royal Horse Guards, and enlisted on the 24th of November 1915 as trooper number 374. He then transferred to the Irish Guards as Private 12813, sustained wounds in March 1918, and brought back to England. And as a result, aged 24 in Brompton Hospital, he died. Now, the difficulty with him is that the family only knew that he'd been in the Royal Horse Guards. And eventually, after something over about nearly 20 years of research, they found out, when they eventually got his death certificate, that he had actually died in the hospital. And luckily enough, going back to the Crimea, the Guards regiments had a section in that cemetery. And what they did was, at the commencement of when they got this plot, at the commencement of the Crimean War, they put up one memorial and just added names during the war one by one. Now, and then the same thing happened in World War One. And with his one, the date was actually missing, but the date of it that he died was on it, which matched the death certificate. And the Commonwealth War Graves Commission afterwards added a grave to him, so he's on two memorials there. I'm just working on a memorial for all the details that I have in the order that there would be on a memorial, and the 179 lives, if there will be, and I'm saying if there will be a memorial to them, this is what a memorial should look like. The scale of it will depend on the amount involved. And for that purpose, I decided to put the book together just to have them remembered and to make a start on it. There is one memorial to RIC in the Great War, and was presented to the Castledale Royal British Legion by the IUC George Cross in 2023. It's the only one in the island of Ireland that remembers them in the First World War. And just a synopsis of the book, there's 179 men remembered, and all of those are certified by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. I have their certificates. I have photographs of several of them, either in RIC uniform or in military uniform. And in some cases, you can see in the bottom row, I've actually got photographs of their graves. But the information that was given on soldiers when they went off to war, as regards the relatives, who they were related to, I found that 43 of the 179 were actually sons of RIC men. And the difficulty with the sons of the RIC men is that the fathers were actually on the move during the duration of the war. So what was on one record wasn't on another. So I was able to match that with the full RIC record and the number of each of the ones. So it's a pointer. There's more information to be got, and any other genealogic information I also add into it by way of, I found in newspapers or otherwise. Or if they had siblings who were in the war and were killed, I include all of those. And I've in the book, I've history of the Heart Society, to put everything in context, how he came to do this. And this is just some of the tables that are in it. It's just table A, there's the 179 members who were killed in 1914, 1918. The order in which they were killed, and the month by month. The second table then is the native counties of the 174 they're the Irish born, and there were 5 British born, you can see at the end, and you can see there's 19 there from Cork. I think that was the majority. And then the 5 English ones. And then the various regiments that they got killed when they were wearing those particular cap badges. And of course, the Irish Guards is tops there, and second in line then would be the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, followed by the Royal Munster Fusiliers. And then the ranks of which they were in when they were killed. Again, 29 sergeants, and they would be just lately promoted, and lance corporals. And the ages of them, anything from 21 up to 42, but the majority being in the lower to mid-20s. And the amount of service that they would have had. So one there had listed in 1899. One who had actually just completed his training in 1915 and just barely made it out to the depot and was killed. And then the religions, in fact, one Mormon, believe it or not, majority Catholic, and next one down Protestants, and these are the cemeteries. Now, what I've also included in the book is the complete list of cemeteries and how many casualties are in that cemetery. So if you're visiting a casualty, you're looking for one that you know that there are others in it. And that's just it's done by countries. And then coming to Belgium, you can see the same there with 13 on the Meningate Memorial, whose remains were never found but remembered there. We found in some cases where some of them were remembered afterwards, where the body was through the area afterwards, would end up on the Meningate Memorial, and also they have a grave, so the 2 memorials to those. Then again, you have the Irish ones, and one you can see there in Turkey. And then the next stage is I have, when it comes to the cemetery, I've named those in alphabetical order of the amounts and those who are in the actual cemetery. So, as I say, if you're visiting Bethune Cemetery, you know that there, and you're looking for Hutchinson, you'll see there are 3 more there in that cemetery. And this is the order that they would go on a memorial. Now, I just one preview. I've just finished this book, and it's coming out next year, on the Royal Irish Constabulary Auxiliary Force, 1881 to 1883. And they were known as the Magpies. They had white epaulets, so white facings. At one time, they were actually called the Piebald Police, believe it or not. And they're the guys who occupied all the huts during the land wars. I found every single hut station that's there, and there's 440 of them. For me, anyway, it's definitely is the forerunners of the Black and Tans, the way they're recruited, their training Kildare. There's an awful lot of similarities, but in this case, it worked. They were just dropped into these places as a security force, and held on. And these are special IKEA type huts that they would have had. Reinforced were metal huts, and they were aged between 20 and 39. And of the 440 who joined, 31 were discharged, 22 resigned, and 387 were allocated to 21 RC divisions in 18 counties. So that's it. If any questions.